here we go. Recording now started. It is week 2, day 4. We are doing our introduction to full stack. So the goal, again, as stated, is to create this full stack app that will allow us to create a user, edit a user, delete a user, or show one or all the users, right? So our CRUD acronym is our guiding tool. So created and show one. Now we have edit as well, or update, and then delete finally. Okay. Now this app that we will be building, that's very much like our assignment due here, is not going to be completely like the final version that you would have to submit on your test. It's close, but there's some vital steps that are missing. But as you can see here, this front end page is able to have dynamic data now that we have stored into our database. Okay, so this is exciting stuff. Let's go ahead and learn how to connect our database into or with our Flask app. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we have to do in order to do this. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is set up our folder. Okay, so I'm going to do this with you if you want to follow along. I'm going to do this. I'm going to recreate this, I mean. So let's go ahead and say, I'm going to go into my desktop from here and go to my Python 2 folder. Let's see what's in here. I'm going to say create a new folder. In here, it's going to be called users CRUD. So mkdir users CRUD. Okay, I'm going to cd into this here. Now that I'm in here, I have now the folder that I want everything created in. Okay, so I'm going to open this up in VS Code so that I can see my files as they're being created. Okay, here's my Visual Studio Code. And on this left column here is where I should see my files and folders created. All right, so at this step, I need a little guidance. Who can help me? I have my folder. What are some things that we need to do every time we create a Flask app? We're going to start creating a checklist after today. Okay. So let's start remembering this pattern. What's the first step? We did this just a few days ago. Well, actually last Friday.
You gotta make your project folder.
Yes, let's see how we remember this still. Okay, so we need to create the environment. Pip env install, and then what else? Really close, Keisha. Pip env install Flask. Perfect. Okay. And what this does is create our pip files. Okay, we have our pip file and our pip.log. Okay, nice. Okay. Now that we've done this, we are missing still a key file that we need. What's the file that I'm looking for? Okay, touchserver.py. Right, because we're dealing with a Python backend. We need a Python server. Okay, and we've likened this to our cook area, right? Our back. our backend. All right, but there's still a couple more key folders and files that I'm going to need in order to make this work, right? Before we start filling this out, yes. Okay, so templates. Okay, let's make that. Okay. And I'm going to CD into my templates. Okay. And I'm going to say touch index.html, because as we all know, this templates folder is to hold our HTML folder. This is to hold our front end. Okay, so now we have a backend. It's in the proper space with the pip.lock files. So we have our environment up and ready to be ran. Now I know that there's a couple more folders and files we can add. It's not completely necessary at this point, but what can we do? There we go. I see it in the chat. So I'm going to exit my templates folder. I'm going to make a static folder. And in my static folder, I'm going to CD into it. I'm going to say a JavaScript folder, go in there, and then create my JavaScript file. So you see that there. Okay, so I'm going to exit this. I'm going to make my CSS folder. So go into the CSS and touch style.css. And there we are. We have our JavaScript and CSS folder. We can also make an images folder even though we don't have one. But let's get in the practice of doing that before we start any app. cd ... make dir images. Okay, if I have any images that I need to put in my front end, I'm going to save them to this folder. Okay, so let's close the static for now. Let's put a basic template for HTML, exclamation mark, easy enough. Now, do we remember how to connect our HTML to our CSS file? There was something slightly different that would go in the head, as well as to connect the JavaScript file at the body. Okay, we're not gonna, if someone has the answer, go ahead and let me know in the chat. But just FYI, these are not yet connected. So if someone has the answer there, I'd appreciate you guys digging that up. I'm not going to give you the code right away. See if we can dig out where we had the answer once. And I'm going to go to my server.py file. All right. And so at this point, I have what I need to make this form of a user's CRUD app. Okay, this version that you see on the right, this is what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. I'm going to introduce us into what the config versus controls versus models are and how we can remember that. But today we're just going to deal with this something simpler here. Very simple. Just have a server.py file. And what you see here is our new contender here, our new player. The MySQL connection.py file. Okay, so let's learn what this is because it's super important to us. This is what's going to be our, well, as you see, our connection to our MySQL. All right. So, where did we go? Where did we go? Did we accidentally go too far? Yes, we did. Okay. All right, hold on a second. Oh, here it is. Okay. So, we're here now. And at this point, when we have created our templates here for our folder, we're ready to get started. Okay, we still haven't built a server.py, but that's okay. We're going to build that still. Okay, so let's follow these instructions because this is this, in addition to what we've already created, we're going to need to follow these steps in these order as well. Okay, so step one is to create a database now. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm pulling up MySQL Workbench, and we'll create a database with a table just like this one here, this friends table. Right, so I've got my MySQL Workbench up, and we're going to go ahead and go into our ERDs here. I'm going to create a new one called Dojo Friends. Okay, let's get this. There we are. There's a word there for a second. Okay, and so I want to rename this guy. Really important that I rename this Dojo Friends. And the reason it's important that I name this is because I am going to connect that file through the name of this database. Okay, so this is essential that I have an identifying a name. Okay, so now that's complete, we're gonna go ahead and put in this friends folder, table, friends. Okay, let's go ahead and put that in. First name, last name. Last name, occupation. Created at. Switch this to date time. And then current timestamp. Oh, that didn't go. There we go. Updated at. And then we put that in. Okay, so now our friends table looks complete. Looks just like what we see here. Let's go ahead and forward engineer it, and then we'll have our database created. So I'll go ahead and click database, forward engineer, continue. All right, let's drop the objects. Okay. And once that's completed, we're good. So that's now done. Check. Let's see it in our instance here. We're going to go to our local instance. And if I refresh, I should see or Dojo Friends. Here we go. Dojo Friends. Here we are. So let's see our table. Let's see that it's there. I just like to see it. Okay, and here it is. Here's our table. It's empty. So let's go ahead and start filling it with values. Insert into, because as we work with our database, we're going to want to pull up data to prove that we're actually connected. So we're going to have to seed some data in here in order to do that. So we'll say insert into friends. And then we'll say first name, last name. And then occupation. Okay. And what else do we need? We don't need the created at, updated at? No, we don't. And then we say the values that we want to enter. let's give a couple values here. Bilbo Baggins. Ring Bear. Okay. So let's go ahead and run it. And there's Bilbo. Let's add a few more. Let's say what's Gandalf's last name? Okay, that's good enough. Doesn't matter. And one more. Gimli G. And he's a dwarf. Okay, I know my classification and naming style here isn't the best, but it does the job. All we want is a full table. And so that's what we have here. And this is what we want to see in our HTML file once we have it rendered, correct? So I'm going to leave this now. I have my database seated. Okay, now here's the fun part, if you can call it fun. We're going to take a new file called a MySQL connection file. Okay, if you can't copy paste it, you can click here to download it. But this file here is a connecting file that allows us to run queries and connect to our database. So I'm going to go ahead and create this, paste it in, and then go ahead and explain it as I see. All right, so well, let's do it through the terminal. I'm in my static folder. I'm in users CRUD now. So what I want to do is make this file right here. So touch MySQL connection.py.
Hey, Josh,
Yes.
where is this at again to copy and paste it? Which
Let-
part of the Learn platform? Connecting to database. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Link there now. Okay. So I've created this file now. Let's go ahead and see it. Here it is. It's empty, but we're going to take the code and paste it in. Okay. And then we're going to break it down. All right. So let me take a poll before I do any further explanation. Do we all recall all the steps that I've taken so far in creating this app? Creating the pip and pip block files, server, creating a database. I want to know how well we're following along, because so far this should be standard stuff. Okay, looking good then. Alrighty. Now, this, as you can see, is a class object. And here we have an instance, our constructor to create an instance. And I want you all to hover your eyes over here to where it says password. Now, for us Mac users that had to have a password that's 8 characters long, we said we wanted the password to be root root. So I'm going to change mine here to root root. Now, for all you PC users that didn't have to do that, you're going to leave it as is. Okay? So you're going to leave it as is. This here is going to be, as you can already see, a file that connects to our database for us. And it's going to allow us to communicate with this file so that this file can communicate with the database. It's called an ORM file. All right. So now that we've configured this, We don't have to fully understand everything here. It's standard to have this boilerplate code as a connecting file between your app and the database. Okay, it won't always look as simplistic as this, but it's pretty simple that any enterprise level app for a company will have this type of connecting file, an ORM file. And this here, this method in this class, it's a function, as you can see. It takes in self, and then it has two other parameters, query and data. Query and data. So query and data, we're both, and sometimes just one. These are parameters that we need. And I'll show you how we need them. Let's hover over here to this insert query. Okay. This insert query takes in what? Query. So whatever string that we would pass in as a query, and by string, I mean a string like this, right? We would pass in a string like this. This is a query, right? This is another, well, this is an insert here. But these are what this is going to receive. It is going to receive a string that is a query. And for the data that would go into a string like an insert here, see how this one has the values Gimli, G, and dwarf? That's what the data would hold if it is an insert. Okay? So not super essential you fully wrap your mind around this, but what I do want you to understand is that whenever you run a query, okay, whenever you run a query, insert queries will return an ID number of the row you just inserted, right? So let's look at this here. Let's look at this table. Oh, we already have it pulled up. If we were to insert a new row, oh, there we go, Rohan. And Rohan is he's a he's a warrior. And he lives in the woods, okay? That's his description. You can tell how my knowledge of Lord of the Rings by this point, okay? So Rohan, we're gonna throw him in there, and what it's gonna give us is a new row of data. All right? Insert, and let's see our table. What it would return as soon as I would do a new insert like this through my app is the ID number for that new row that we had just inserted, 4. Okay? So what this is telling me, what this comment is telling me, is that every insert query is going to, as you see here, return cursor dot last row ID. So that's going to return the ID of the last row that was just created in the insert. In this instance, it would have returned 4 if I had used this file to do what I just did here, which was insert a friend into the friends table. Okay, so we have an insert and we have also a select. Okay, so the select query will return data from the database as, and a big hint here, as a list of dictionaries, as a list of dictionaries. And we're going to work with this list of dictionaries today. But this result is going to take them all and put it into here result, which then gets returned to us as a list of dictionaries. And the reason why it's important for us to know this is because when we're accessing data from our database, we have to work with the proper data type in order to properly extract the data. Okay, so here we have a list of dictionaries. And at this point, we have finished setting up our MySQL connection.py. we understand all that we really need to know at this point, which is that an insert will return the number. It will return a number, which is the ID of the row. And a select query will return the data as a list of dictionaries. So whenever you're asking for data, you're getting a list of dictionaries back. Now, the update and delete will not return anything at all. Okay, so for updates or edits and deletes, that's not going to be necessary. Okay, now I know I've thrown a lot of information at you guys at this point, but there's nothing really to test to see if you are, following along so well. I think we're gonna have to just wait a little bit longer, and let's continue. Okay, so all right, let's go ahead and move along to the next step, and then we'll see how it all comes together in just a moment. All right, now that we've finished this here, and we've seen how this file has accounts for select, insert, update, and delete, we're going to move on to this file. But one more thing I should mention, one more thing here, and we're going to see this in just a second. What happens in the case where we send a query and our file receives a query, but that the query is syntactically wrong, right? Like, what if I say a query that looks like this here? Select all, and I like throw in a typo like this, right? And I somehow accidentally send a query with a typo. It's gonna error out, and there's an error here. So what happens if we do that with our app, or something like that happens while we're working? What we should expect is an error statement. So it should say something went wrong, and then that statement, that error statement, should reflect that error statement that we're getting back here, which says error code, you have error in your SQL syntax. So this error code is going to be passed along and displayed to our terminal if we were to get an error. Okay, just letting you know how that works before we close out of this file. And now let's move on to our next file. Okay, this next one is our friend.py file. Okay, now, as you can tell, this is a Python file that is named different than our server.py file. So now we're working with multiple Python files, right? And the reason we do that is because if we didn't do that, our our server.py file will be a really long file. Okay, it will be a file that will be like maybe like 100 lines, and in order to fix anything, if it breaks in any way, you're gonna have to parse through it, and it's gonna be a lot harder. Plus, this comes with more benefits. It allows us to compartmentalize our app the way that a company would in what's called an MVC framework. And now we're going to go over that officially tomorrow. But as you can tell, we're already partitioning out work to other Python files that's not our server.py file. Okay, so our server.py file, it is not the only Python file that's now essential for our app to work properly. When I took a test, well, when I was a student in 2019, the dojo didn't have this system here. The curriculum wasn't up to date the way that it was when I was a student. It would just have everything on a giant server file. And it was actually kind of hard, but we managed. Later on, the dojo realized, oh, we've got to teach this too at this point. But I did learn it. It's just in another stack. But for Python, it was just one large Python file. Okay. We are going to partition out duties to other files now, as you can see. And what does this file do? Well, for one, let's create it, and then we'll dissect it as we go along. Okay. So let's go ahead and create this friend.py file. All right. So I'm here. I'm going to pull up my, I want to see it created as I do it. So I will say touch friends.py file. Okay, now I'm in it. And it's right here. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste the code in from the platform and then explain it again. I like just to see it better here in Visual Studio. Okay. So let's go through this step by step to see what each bit of code does and get the geography of what we're looking at here. All right, number one thing is that we need to connect to our MySQL connection file. So this is what this is for. It connects this friends.py file. I think I lost my pen. This friends.py file to the MySQL connection.py file. So it says from MySQL connection, import connect to MySQL. And what is connect to MySQL? It is, let's see here. Excuse me. Oh, I thought it was spelled the same. Let me double check here. This function here at the very bottom of my MySQL connection.py returns MySQL connection, which is the name of this class. And it receives the database that you would have passed in as a name. So that's why we had to have a specific name for our database. We called it Dojo Friends. It receives the name of our database. It runs the query. And then this function, connect to MySQL, returns this class object. Okay. And so that is what this is connecting to in friends.py. It is connecting to that function call. All right, so this is our connection to MySQL. Now, what is all this? Okay, we're going to look at this in just a second. But before we do that, we're going to finish our server.py file. Okay, let's go back to creating a server.py file the way that we are used to seeing it. So what are some important lines of code that we need in our server.py file? Do we remember this? Let's build this together.
Import to Flask.
Okay. So I'll say from Flask, import Flask. And what are some other Flask requirements that we have introduced at this point?
Render template.
Yes. And what does this do? It connects us to our HTML file, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And we also have a couple more Flask tools that we've had. We have request and redirect. Redirect. All right. We don't need session. I'm not going to use session just yet. But yes, thank you, Brooks. Okay. Now we're going to have to say from, so we're going to say, name the app. So we're going to say app oops, let me go down a couple lines. We'll say app equals Flask under name double underscore. And then I'm going to say at the very bottom here, if name equals to main delete that. Oops, delete that. And then we'll say if the name of this app equals the main here, then we're gonna run this app and get it started. And I'm gonna just copy paste at this point because I don't want to take up that much time. Okay, so I don't want to risk a typo, and I think I want you guys to get in the habit of copying and pasting, because typing does cause issues. I mean, you make a simple error, one line of one keystroke. Okay, we do need a secret key. And that secret key, let me think of how I'm going to write that one here. Let's see. Let's see if it's already written for us. Ah, yes. No, you're right. I got ahead of myself. That is for session. Good catch, Austin. So good catch. All right. So we have here our server.py that we need. Okay. So we have this created. We have this created. And we have this part out as well. Now for the meat and potatoes of this file, we're going to go ahead and pull this route. Okay. So our server file is going to have a route. And this route is going to go to this, the initial call is going to say friends. Well, let's comment this out. We don't need this yet. We don't need to know what this is yet. All we want to do is render this template right now, and we'll explain that as we go. So we'll say here, we'll type in hello world. Okay. So at this point, our server can run, right? Because we have the essential components for it to run. We have Flask imported, and our Flask returns a index.html that we have in our templates folder, and that folder here has our index.html, which has our hello world. So let's go ahead and get this started. Now let's get some help with this as well. Now that I'm here, what are the 2 lines of code I need to run this?
Need pip env shell.
Yes. And what does this do?
Activate the server
Yeah,
file.
the virtual environment. The virtual
Yeah.
environment. Okay, nice. And what is now the next step? Python 3,
fine.
thank you. Server.py. Okay, so now let's see this up and running. Okay, so far so good. Now we have an app running with a MySQL connection .py, and we still want to use this, right? So we need to fill in some gaps of knowledge of what these bits of code here that I commented out are. What is this exactly? This here looks like it's invoking the friend class, right? Let's look at our friends.py. as you can tell, this object in the friends.py has the same exact data as our table would, right? So, I mean, sorry, this class here has the same data. So it has an ID, it has the first name, last name, occupation, created at, and updated at. Okay, and so now that we have this, the reason we have moved this to friends.py, as I've already stated, is so that we don't have all our code in just one server.py file. It makes the page a little hard to read. But in order to connect our server.py file from our friends.py file, we need one line of code here that's going to do that for us. It's this line, from friend import friend. Okay. And so you're going to put that in the top where the imports are. And one thing that I want us to take note of here is the spelling. So we can easily get tripped up on the spelling. See how it's called friend.py and I called it friends.py? This is not going to find this file. It's looking for friend. But mine's called friends with an S. So let me go ahead and adjust that. I'm going to rename this here. Okay. And now that's complete. This here is connecting to the name of this file, friend.py. And what it's importing from this file is that class friend. So now this server.py file has access to this class. And if it has access to this class, it has access to this class's data and methods, right? So our attributes and our methods. So now that we're connected to our friend.py file from our server.py file, let's see what our server.py file is asking from our friend.py file. It's saying, okay, I'm going to create a variable called friends. And I want this class to get all. Get all. So it's calling a method in that friend.py file. And at this point, I'm going to pull them side by side so we can see them a bit clearer. Okay, here we are. So we've created a variable, and the value of the variable is this function call. Friend.getAll. So what does getAll do? If we look at our friend class, and now we look down to see here our methods, I'll create a little space so you can see where I am. I am going to this class method called getAll. And what does getAll receive? It receives the class. So it receives all this. And so it says, query select all from friends. This is my query. And what is a query again? It's a SQL injection or a SQL query. So this is going to look a lot like, or exactly like this, right? Select all from friends. Same thing. Oops, I think I deleted it. Nope, I just scrolled over. Okay, so select all from friends. This is what this string is, right? And it's given into the value of this variable called query. All right, so now this variable called query holds this string, which is going to look for all my friends. All right, so now we'll look down here to this next variable, results. And this results equals connect to MySQL. Where have we seen this before? We've seen this when we were in our, well, MySQL connection.py, right? We remember this function call from MySQL connection.py. So if I go there again, there it is. Connect to MySQL. And what this does is it receives a database name. So what I need here is the correct database name. So what did I name my database for this project? Let's take a look again. It's called Dojo Friends. This is what I've named it. So if I change the name here to Dojo Friends, it has the proper database name to make that connection. And that's the last missing piece of the puzzle to connect our database. Okay, we entered the correct password here in the MySQL connection. We gave it root. All right. And the way it knows to connect to the right database in our MySQL is by giving it that name, that special name that we had named it. And we called it Dojo Friends for this database. And so that's what it's connecting to. Okay. And so now that it's done that, it's going to, well, let's go ahead and do something here. I want to make a slight adjustment. I want to print this here. I want to print this here, this results. Okay, so let me show us what this would accomplish for us. So before we start using this, I'm just going to say, put this in a print statement. Okay. We are going to just ignore this for a little bit. Let's see, where does this end? Where does this begin here? Right. Ignore, and ignore that. Or maybe I should just comment this out. There we are. I'll know to put it back. Okay, so this is all I want to see. Okay, all I want to see is this query at this point. So let's go ahead and see if we can see this in action. I think we're just about ready to see some data. So let's go ahead and run it. We're missing something. No module named PyMySQL. Okay, so where is my thing here? Let's debug together. Okay, so we are looking through no module named friend. Okay, so it's not finding my module. Let's go ahead and take a look at why. It's looking for a return. So what I'm going to do is instead copy this over here. Let's just copy this over here. I'm going to create a shortcut to show what the point of this is by itself. And then I'm going to put in some more functionality to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and say, ignore this for a second and just print this results. Also, I'm going to need you to connect to the database from here as well. So I'm going to put this import from here. Let's see this now. I think that should fix it. Ooh, okay. But it's still giving me the same error. So file server.py. Okay, it's my server.py. And it says okay, so from this line here, so it's saying in line 3, I have an error, and then line 2 possibly. So let me go ahead and take a look. Did I miss something when I was copying? And my server.py, I need to examine line 3. So this here, okay. And yes, here we are. So I think we missed a vital step at this point. Let me take a look here at the platform. Here it is, looking straight at me. We need to install this in order to get this going. Thank you, Brooks. So let's go ahead and run that line. I'm gonna exit here. And I'm going to say pip env install PyMySQL. Fantastic. Okay, I got so excited I missed that vital step. When we now run our app, we're going to have to run this along with the install of Flask. Okay, so now let's run our environment. Pip env shell. Okay, and let's take a look. Okay, getting somewhere. All right, saying query not defined. So what are we missing on line 18 of server.py? Let's take a look.
You didn't copy that statement to this file.
Which one? Sorry, Manjira.
The query equal to, you have not copied that into this file.
Which one exactly? I'm a little...
Line 19.
Line 19. Yes, this one here.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right, it's up and running. No problem. Okay, so if now that I am connected, I say hello world, I refresh, and I have one more tiny error here. What is it? Results. I think it needs results as well. It's looking for results. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm trying to simplify it without having to make it as, let's see here. What can I do? I can say, oh, let's do this. Let's just remove results. Let's just print this connection, just like this. Okay. Okay. Looking better. Here we are. And this is what we needed to see. Okay. What is this? Let's take a look at this. This is the data from our table. I'm going to copy it so that we can see it a little better. Okay, now that I have this copied, I am going to paste this here. No, I don't just want to create something here, and then I'll just call this something. What we have here is a list of objects. Oh, I can make this a... It's a little bit easier to see that way, right? Okay. So we have a list of objects. And I'm just going to indent here so we can see a little clearer. All right, where does this one end? This one here, updated at, and then ID. So anywhere I see a new ID, I'm gonna indent. Okay. All right. So here we have a list of objects, as you can see. Object 1, Object 2, Object 3, and Object 4. The reason we want to see this way is because when we pull data from our query call and need to parse through it in order to display it on our front end, we have to see that we're accessing a list of objects. As you can see here, the brackets tell us that this is a list and that each item or element in the array is an object. So in order to go into this list, we're accessing values in an array. And when we access the value in the array, we have to use object.notation to grab the values that we want. So if we want the value of the ID, we're having to give the key name, right? So the object.key name. In this case, if we want the ID, we'll get 4. If we say first name, we'll get Rohan. And so we have now we have a list of objects, and this would pull however many rows of data that we have stored in our database. Okay, so let's take a poll. How well do we understand that when we connect to MySQL and we ask for data, that we're getting back a list of objects as so? Okay. And although I did miss one vital step here, which was installing PyMySQL, I'm glad you guys caught it. And we'll have an official checklist starting tomorrow. We're going to go step by step. I'm going to write it out, and we're going to follow it so that we don't miss a step every single time, okay? But since we're still very simple and that we're going to change our number of steps, if we were to create a checklist today, the number of steps would be slightly different than tomorrow. And tomorrow is going to be the official checklist that we're going to have to just need for future projects. Okay, so now that we can see this, we can see that what we're returning and what we're seeing, what we're parsing through is an array of objects. Manjira, before I continue, what's your question exactly? I don't understand. The statement function call to which we send to the database? Which one is that you're seeing, that you're talking about? The statement, the function call to which we send to the database. Okay.
Yeah, the connect to my SQL. So we are calling that function with this database, and so the whatever is returned from there is it a dictionary, and that's where we're trying to connect that particular property or method and
When
get
we
something.
Yes. So, okay, tell me if I answer this correctly, but when we use this line, connect to MySQL, right? Do you see that it's calling connect to MySQL from this file here, MySQL connection? So it's looking for this function call from this file. And this function call is right here at the very bottom of the file.
Mhm.
It takes in the name of the DB, and then it returns the class, which then takes in that same DB name. So here we are. It runs the class and it creates an instance. And we connect here through our password, and through here is where we will do for example, we did a select, right? So our select here was our function call, result.fetchAll. And when we access that table that shows our data, let's go ahead and go look at our database for a second. Okay. When we ran this query, select all from friends, this data that we see here got returned to us like this. Okay. Let me put them side by side so you can see the similarity. This table data got returned to us as an array of objects. And so that's what we're seeing for the first row is the first object. 1 Bilbo Baggins, ring bearer, created at, updated at. 1 Bilbo Baggins, ring bearer, and then the created at, and then updated at here. Are you seeing that a little better, Manjira?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So,
And so when we return our query here, it's returned as an array of objects.
yeah.
Okay. Now,
Good,
lastly,
thank you.
how do we get this information? How do we get the information from here in our console to here on our browser? That's now the next step we're going to take.
Yeah, redirect to.
Yep. Yep. So let's go ahead and build this out. All right, I'm going to pull up my code here. I don't need to see this anymore. Go back to my server.py. And let's undo a couple things here. I actually, yeah, let's go back to the way our server.py was. Okay. So now we're going to do that query call through here. We're going to say friends, this variable here is going to hold that data from that function call. Okay. So let's go ahead and open up our friend.py and fix what we had done here. So what then does this hold? If this is an array, oh no. If this is an array, what this for loop does is it goes through these results here and it says, I want you to take for each friend here, for each class that we are creating an instance of through the data, I want you to take that instance of that class and put it in this array. Okay, in order to make this a little bit more clear, I'm going to say all friends. Okay, and then we're going to say all friends here, all friends here. Okay, this is a little bit clear. What this array holds is a list of all our friends, as you can see here. But the way it holds it is through appending, right? We are appending the class instance of friend. Let's go ahead and see this as well. I'm going to print CLS friend as well. Okay, so at the very end of this call, we're returning an array, which is going to be a class call for that one friend that iterates through our results. What class friend is doing is calling this instance. It's calling this instance. And it's creating a class object from every object that we have in our array. Okay, so what this is doing, it's invoking the friend class. And what does this do, def dunder init? You remember what an instance is? What is an instance? Can someone remember the analogy I gave there? It's the time and place that this object is going to be created. Time, yeah, a frame in time. So instance, it's standing at this moment of time. We are going to create a class object, a friend. It's going to take in self. Remember how self takes in, it's like an anchor that appends the data that we would be giving to it. And what's the data that it's receiving? What's the data that it's receiving? The data comes from our database, right? So what we're giving here in this friend is for each iteration in this array, that's one friend. So we're passing in one friend here. It goes into the data. It creates an object with these attributes. And that is what that one instance is what we are appending to this list of called all friends. Okay, now here's where I know it gets a little tricky to follow the data flow. But if you stick with me here, we're going to figure this out. Okay, so we have a for loop. We defined a friend here in our for loop. What this is iterating over is the results. And remember, the results is what is in here, this print. I need to take away this print so we can see that a little better. Okay, this results is going to connect to MySQL with that query, select all from friends, right? So that's our query right here, select all from friends. It passes in that query. And then what we receive in return is an array or a list of dictionaries, as you can see here. And when we have this list of dictionaries, it's now called results. Okay, we've taken that print and we've put it to results. So we have a list now with results, and we're going to iterate through that list. We're going to say for each object in the list, for friend in results, one friend, two friend, three friend, for every friend that you get in that array of results, I want you to create a class instance of that friend. I want you to create a class instance and also append that instance of that class to this list called all friends. This list called all friends then is going to contain an instance for each object in our data. Okay, I'm going to reiterate over this a couple times until we can understand this, but I want to see how well we're understanding at this point. Okay, do we see here the data flow? How results gives us a list of dictionaries, and then we are iterating through that list of dictionaries, creating class instances of each object, and appending those instances to our all friends array. Okay, if you're not getting it, we're going to get it. All right, meet with me, meet with our instructors, but we're going to have to understand this in order to move forward. and it's not going to all stick the first time you read it. All right, so now that we have a list containing instances of each object in our array that we would have returned, we return all friends. And where does this return go to? Where does this function call get called originally? It gets called in our route here that's our basic home route, right? So when we launch our server, we're going to see this, and I want to see another print here. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to refresh my page. Ooh, I have one missing thing I probably missed here. So let's take a look. Friends equals friend.getAll on server on line 14. Okay. Friends equals friend.getAll. Oh, so what am I missing here in order to make this work?
Import friend from friend import friend.
Yep. Okay. So let's go ahead and take that. No, it's already typed out for me. Where is it? Here it is. All right, and so let's look at my console again. Here's my friend objects. Why are these appearing here? It's because I asked them to be printed here. So for each friend that I have in my database, I'm going to print that class object, and that's what you're going to see. That's what you're seeing here. Okay, what if I say friend dot name or something like that? First name. Ah, wait, not yet. We're getting a little ahead. Okay. So we have our friend objects. We're getting a little closer here to becoming full stack developers. We need one more thing in order to make this work. We're receiving the data. The point, the part that we're missing here is the part that allows our server to return that data from friends into our index.html. Now, from our last work together on Friday with our Flask app, I think we remember how to do this. Do we remember Jinja? Do we remember how to pass information to receive on our HTML? I know you guys know this because we tested on it. You guys gave me high numbers. So what's the step I need in order to see now this list of objects here on my page? All right, I'll give you guys like a minute here.
Session.
We have to close. We're not going to use session yet. Very, very good guess though. We're just going to pass it in.
Double parentheses.
We're going to say friends equals friends. Okay. So we have a variable here. We have a new variable. And we've given it the value of this variable here. In fact, we can make this a little bit easier to read. Friends, we'll make it friends list. Okay, so our friends list is going to take in this variable friends, which has that list of class instances and objects. Okay, so now that we've done that, our last step here is to render this on our HTML. So I remember the shortcut. Tyler Maxwell, what was the shortcut for that Jinja extension? Sorry to bug you here. What's
No, it's okay. J4, JFOR.
okay? This is new to me
Okay.
too. So here I'm gonna say for friend in friends list, I want you to print all the first names. Friend dot first name. Okay. And let me just double check here to see that that is good. All right. So I believe this should work. Let's go ahead and test this out. So we'll have to refresh here. And there's our first names. Getting it from our database. All right, we want to see this a little bit more organized. So we're going to have to put this into a list or a table in our HTML. So let's go ahead and create an HTML table within this for loop in our HTML. So let's go here. And I'll say table, or let's see here. I'm gonna just work around it for a second. So I'm gonna say table, and I'm gonna say table head in my table.
Yeah, can we use a bootstrap for that or no?
Yes, of course, of
Oh.
course. In fact, I'd encourage you to use it because it's gonna make it a lot cleaner. I just haven't used it yet. Yes, and so I'm gonna say in my table head, I want a table row. I want to say th first name and last name. Okay. Let's just get some things in order here. And then after the head, we're going to go with the body. So in the body, we have table data. And in this data, I want to see this here. First name. And I think that's good enough. We just want to see a first name. Well, do we have last name? Yes, we do. So I'm going to do one more for last name. Okay. Now we need these to be in our for loop. And so our for loop starts here. Oops. And so let's go ahead, put that around our table.
Maybe below the head.
Yeah, I do have it below my table head here. Okay. I'm not sure this exactly matters, but we can figure this out. Maybe it does. I'm going to put it in the body. How about that?
It's like-
Okay, here we are. So I have my table. Let's refresh and take a look now. And why is it repeating the list of friends again at the end?
So wrap your TDs in a TR. So inside your for loop, like above line 18, put a TR.
Ah, okay. So let me write TR. Oh, for table row.
Yeah.
And the table data is gonna be for the And is it one single TR? Yes. Okay. Okay. And here we go. We have our 4 characters ready for an adventure, and we have it from a database. This is information stored in a table in our database. And at this point, this lecture is going on a little long. So what we're going to do tomorrow is build a full CRUD app then. Okay. It's going to have create, read. This is a read all because it's showing me all, right? Do you see how that is that query? Select all from friends. Where is my friend.py? Here's my first query. So that's my R in CRUD. So we have 3 more to go. We have create, edit, and delete. And as we create these methods for editing, showing 1, or deleting, we're going to have to fit them in a better file structure. All right, so let me show you what we're going to be working on tomorrow. Where is the thing I'm looking for? So here it is, I believe. Excuse me while I just parse around here to the platform. I think it was in database connection.
You looking for the modularization?
Yeah, no, just the folder file structure that we were given as an option to create before we.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay. Well, there's no need to see it from scratch. I think we're gonna. I think it's maybe above then. From form to DB. No, okay. I won't play with it too long because I'm wasting time at this point. What I want to show you guys is that tomorrow, this area here is going to look much different. Instead of having a friend.py folder file living outside here without being in a folder, and without this being in its own proper space, we're going to be making a lot of class objects for bigger apps, right? And so our server also is not going to be the main file, which is going to route from now on. So we're going to have to even create more folders and files and organize them in a certain way with certain functionality in order to make our full stack app in the MVC Model View Controller framework. Okay, so that is going to be the object of tomorrow's lesson. We're going to continue to go over CRUD and making our full stack app with our database. All right. I know this lesson was a bit heavy, but we have this night to digest it. And tomorrow we're going to be learning a brand new way of restructuring our folders and files here. And this lesson coming up in particular was very hard for me to, as a learner, as a student, to remember, but I have a method to show you guys. So I'm excited for tomorrow morning's lesson. Okay. Please do the reading and complete the end of day assignment. This is the Flask plus MySQL relationships reading that we're going to have done before we come in tomorrow. I want you guys to be fully read up and ask all the questions that we would need to ask in case we run into an error. But as you can see here, we're going to be building a models folder and putting our class into our models folder. And we're going to have to create a view folder which is going to be, well, I guess all of our views. Model view controller and a models folder. Yes. So here's our models folder. Again, this is jargon until we deal with it tomorrow, but I'm going to make this jargon stick tomorrow. Okay. So I know this is a bit heavy. Let's give some feedback for the one final last time. Do we see here how I was able to pull my data from my database to my index.html? Okay. All right. And it's looking good. All right. I really like the way you guys are giving me some honest feedback here. I'm going to share the results so you guys can see where you are all at compared to one another. It doesn't show who's who, but just to see in general what the poll results look like. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our calendar one last time. We finished our introduction to full stack. We're now pulling data from our database and reading it on our HTML file. Tomorrow, we're going to go over how to build the proper file folder structure in order to make what's called the MVC framework, Model View Controller. Okay. This will complete our discussion or lessons for this week. And then next week, we have a couple things to add on, which is going to be for creating a valid login and registration. And we're going to need some validations for that. And then once we're able to complete that on our app, we have what we need in order to take our exam. Okay. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you again for today's attention. You guys were well participants. I needed a lot of your help today. You caught a lot of my errors, and I appreciate that. Okay. So I do appreciate you guys having a careful eye and sticking to it. All right. So we have one more day of this week tomorrow. Let's give it our best shot. And I'll go ahead and create the breakout rooms for us to go and study in. Okay. I'll have these videos up in about 30 minutes.
Mr. Josh,